Before we start, I want to tell you about something I've been building. It's called the Clinician Founder Membership Community, a practical place for clinicians who want to bring a meaningful idea to life, whether that becomes a service, a product, a portfolio career, or a new form of impact. It's built around a simple find, test, and build pathway with practical resources, peer support, office hours, and workshops to help you make progress around the clinical life without having to build alone. I'll be opening the doors soon. If you'd like early access, send me the word community on LinkedIn or Instagram, or use the link in the show notes to sign up and get early access to this new founder community. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the Clinician Founder Podcast.
There's like Tiarnan, who's the marketer, who's thinking about how we can improve the services that we offer from a results perspective. But actually, if you're a business owner, the thing that gets you return on investment quickest is paid advertising methods other than organic socials are. So I remember just sat one day and having to let go a lot of our organic social media management clients. I just made a decision that that's the direction that we need to go in. But you imagine when you've got clients, when you've got a business, you have all of these decisions that you have to make on a basically daily. By week 3-ish of the ads being launched, one is extremely happy with the results and very happy with everything that's happened. The other one raises some concerns. They've got the same results, right? Exactly the same thing has happened.
Welcome to another episode of the Clinician Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Shubhendu Kulshreshtha, an emergency medicine doctor, founder coach, and creator of Clinician Founder Everything. This is the show where we explore how clinicians go from idea to impact. Each week, I sit down with clinicians who are building businesses, products, communities, services, and movements that matter. Together, we unpack what they found, what they tested, what they built, and what it really takes to bring meaningful ideas to life. Because the world doesn't need more clinicians with ideas, it needs clinicians who know how to bring them to life. This week, I have the amazing Tiarnan McKeever. Thanks for joining me today, Tiarnan.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. It is so exciting. And as I was saying earlier, this is the first time we're meeting each other. So I'm super excited, and kudos to you for being willing to come straight onto the podcast. So you're currently in your really hot office just outside of London. You've got a small team, but you sounds like you do some pretty big stuff. Do you mind just sharing what all kind of work do you really help others achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are predominantly we're a healthcare marketing agency. We've kind of gone from different areas of marketing over the past few years, or at least I have, from when I started doing this myself, compared to now building a team that is also involved in the work as well. We predominantly work in private healthcare, so we help clinics, hospitals build marketing strategies that help them generate new patients. And then we also do some interesting work with doctors who are not in the private healthcare space. We call it the business to doctor space. So it's often doctors who have created their own businesses who are trying to reach other doctors. That can be things like financial services, coaches, consultants, medical education. So we lie somewhere in that realm, somewhere between private healthcare and then the business to doctor world.
Interesting. When you say business to doctor, you serve the businesses that are trying to reach the doctors. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How interesting. Okay. I should probably ask you, what does it mean to be a founder?
That's a good question. I think it's something that changes quite a lot. So I really wanted to have a business all the way through medical school. I realized very early on that I liked the idea of entrepreneurship, let's say. Initially, it was an autonomy thing and building something myself. That has progressed a bit more recently into a leadership thing. So how can I help the people who I work with? How can I get the best out of them? How can I be the best leader for them? And it's just that when you said, what does it mean to be a founder? For me, the first thing that just came to mind was the sort of the leadership side of things, because that's what's front of mind for me at the moment, right? It's the building something alongside people, rather than maybe if you asked me that question 2 years ago, it would have been all around kind of innovation and making something different. Whereas now it feels more people-centric because of the position that I'm in.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I think if you asked me as well ages ago that, I guess even in med school for me, I loved doing sort of like innovation stuff. I was part of like the Student Surgical Society, and then I had a couple of leadership stuff, and I really enjoyed the autonomy that you mentioned. I think part of the reason why I do emergency medicine is also because of the autonomy aspect of it. But I had no idea that I could like be an entrepreneur and run my own business and do my own thing. So it's really exciting. And I think to me as well, what stands out is like, it's interesting you said leadership, because so many founders are like, the idea is to bring something to life, and you've got a vision in your mind, and you've got to take people from where they are now to the vision that you have. And I think, to me, that is literally what leadership is. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think on the leadership piece in particular, it's the kind of, you go through this curve of, especially maybe as doctors, where you're kind of, you know exactly what your role is. You're always kind of playing a particular role within a particular team. You kind of know what your boundaries are. As soon as you step into the world of business and entrepreneurship, like I've bootstrapped the whole time, basically. There hasn't been anyone else involved other than the people who have them brought on board as employees and so on. You're kind of in this weird world where you don't exactly know what the lines are. You're kind of learning the role as you go. You don't necessarily have here's everything that you have to do. So the leadership becomes much less straightforward. And I find myself very often having this sort of, what am I supposed to do in this situation? What would a good leader do in this situation? There's a book called The Motive. I can't remember the author's name, but talks all about the role of a CEO in particular, and everything that you should be doing when you're leading a team or when you're building something, and kind of the idea of not building it for yourself, but being the person that the team or the organization or your customers need most. Which is very interesting, because I think you go through for me, as an example, going through medical school, kind of thinking, I'm going to step away from medical training because I want to build this thing. And there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of kind of selfishness associated with that, right? You're kind of like, I know what I want to do for me. And then all of a sudden you have to snap back into, right, hold on a second. Well, now which role do I need to play for my team to get the best results, for my customers to get the best results, and so on. So there's like a really interesting dichotomy there as well.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I think a lot of this starts off, and not just, I guess for me, a lot of the people that I've spoken to and many of my clients, like, it often starts off as a internal journey. Like, I want this for my life, and like, here's what I want to achieve. I want to make more money. I want more freedom, blah, blah, blah. But like, to actually do it, you have to be so selfless in to actually be successful. It's hilarious. But before I forget, there is a book that I think you'll enjoy. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 by Jim Collins.
Yeah.
It's a decently thick book. I don't read much. I do audiobooks. So he's got an audiobook as well. To me, this has been like the closest anything comes to being Bible of entrepreneurship in a way. So I think you'll enjoy it. Check it out if you have a moment. Obviously not sponsored or anything, but just generally. Genuinely impressed by the book.
Yeah, I love these sorts of books. I think it's the part of entrepreneurship, the leadership side of things and stuff, that's the most foreign for me. So I love these sorts of books.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I don't know, are you? I get the intuition that you're a data sort of guy. You're writing a book. Of course you're a data. That's why, because you're writing a book called Evidence-Based Marketing. I want to know about that. But Jim Collins, the author of this book, he is very much data oriented as well. So he'll do like a study over 5 years or whatever, and then based on that, be able to kind of tell you what was unique about leadership for these people. He's written a bunch of other books as well, but yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
It's interesting you say that. I'm a data person. I'm kind of, I think extremely logically. I think very black and white, like, which is like a positive thing in some regards, and then like a huge downside in other regards, right? Everyone always jokes and says that there's no gray area with me. It's always kind of all in on one thing or not at all in, and there's no real in between. And I've also got that trait of, like, which lots of entrepreneurs have, which is the very quick start trait, which is I can with loads of ideas and say, let's give them all a try. But the data piece in particular is quite interesting, because when people ask, like, you trained as a doctor, how have you got into marketing? My kind of USP, or our USP, is always that we approach marketing very differently from a purely creative standpoint. Everything we do is very return on investment based, very data driven. Much less, this sounds like fun, this would be fun to try. It's very, what do the numbers tell us that we need to do? And that was something quite different when I had conversations with some of our clients in the first place. It was much less creative driven, much more logical, which in a marketing sense is actually almost counterintuitive in some regards.
Do you think that makes your job easier or harder?
I think when it was just me, it made my job slightly more difficult, because I would struggle with some of the creative side of things, right? But then deliberately, the employees that I've hired, I've kind of indexed for the creativity side of things. So I've deliberately indexed for people who come from marketing backgrounds rather than people who come from medical backgrounds. Let's say, just because we have those different lived experiences and different ways of thinking and solving problems.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like it's obviously I'm projecting here with my own experience of what it's like to kind of think in a similar manner of saying like, actually, it just needs to make sense. And sometimes it's not just about it just making sense. Like even if it makes sense, it needs to be an emotive story and actually resonate for people to buy into the idea and benefit from what you're actually trying to give them. So yeah, that's interesting. But I want to get into this, so like talking about bringing ideas to life. Tell me about how this whole idea of Key Catalyst started.
So it started by accident, like lots of people's ventures do. When I was in first year of medical school, I got my first student loan. I kind of funnily spent a lot of money from that student loan because I had miscalculated how much of it I should have, because I kind of got the terms mixed up.
Whoops.
Spent a lot of it and got an email from the university saying, you have to pay an extra however much it was for rent. So okay, fine, paid it, and then realized I had something like £200 left, which I would need to live on for the next term, essentially. So
Wow.
kind of said, okay, I need to work out a way to make this happen. So I started doing what lots of medical students do, and I started tutoring A-level biology, A-level chemistry, that sort of stuff. But I didn't want to go the traditional route of signing up with an agency. So I thought I will set up an Instagram page and I'll bring students to me so I don't get that, the middleman cut from the agencies. Yeah. Did that for a few months and enjoyed it, but realized that requires me to be in a particular place at a certain time because I need to be on a call with people regularly.
Yeah.
So I thought, how else can I use this social media skill that I've kind of accidentally built? And around that time, I think we had one clinic session during our preclinical years. We would have very sporadic interactions with doctors because a lot of it was preclinical. I was just noticing these trends of doctors having businesses, but then kind of just expecting to have business growth and have customers without putting any effort into it. One of the things that stood out then, I had already started trying to find some customers, and I literally just decided, I'm a medical student. I've started learning this social media marketing thing. The easiest people for me to convince to give me a go at doing this will be doctors, because they'll say, oh, he's a medical student, let's give him a chance. So sent maybe 500, 600 cold emails to different companies. Wow. A few of them said yes. I worked for free for quite a long time. And once I built up a bit of experience, I just realized that there was traction with it. I realized that if I partnered this kind of unique medical school experience and language with marketing, then that gave me something different that not a lot of people had. And then all the way through clinical medicine, as we grew kind of outside of medical school, we got more clients and so on. But then also through medical school, I was still speaking with doctors who had these business ideas, and I was constantly getting this kind of confirmation that doctors can make fantastic businesses. They can solve some really complex problems. What they're not necessarily good at is standing up and then shouting about it and telling people. And they kind of have this, build it and the right people will come mentality, instead of we need to build something and, brand it and market it in a particular way that gets people to come. So it all began as an accident. And then I just had lots of kind of green lights along the way that made me think this is the right direction to go in. And I also, I'll just add one final bit of that on. I also just made the decision in about, I think it was year 2 of med school. I just decided if I continue to do healthcare marketing and I just decide now that that's what I'm going to do and I don't do anything else for the next 40 years, I'll just build like a undeniable portfolio and I will become the best at it, rather than the kind of let me jump between different things and try new ideas. I very much had I'll just stick to this and this is now my thing and I'll keep doing it.
Oh, tell me more about this moment. How did that thought come to your mind and what did that change for you?
I think again, it's kind of the going back to the thinking of like being all in on something or be it not all in. Yeah. I'm not good at doing something half-heartedly. I'm not good at just doing something for fun. Everything very much there has to be an end goal, and I need to be fully committed to doing it. So I just decided, I've been doing this for a year or whatever it might be. I think I'd watched a video from one of the many sort of YouTube business creators. They were just talking about, well, everyone at some point finds business hard. Everyone at some point finds the industry that they're trying to build in difficult. At that moment, you can basically leave and try something else, expecting the grass to be greener, or you can just say, this is the point that I know that I have that option, but if I just wave out and keep going, then what's on the other end of that is much more rewarding.
And so until this point, were you kind of considering a few other things and be like, oh, this might be a temporary thing? Like you said, there was a point when you clearly decided. Before then, what was it?
It was more so not I wouldn't say it felt like I was considering other options, but I didn't necessarily feel all in, if that makes
Right.
sense. I wasn't, I might do this, I might do something else, but it was just more like, this is fun. I'm enjoying doing this. This is fun. But, when people ask me what I was doing, it would be very much, I'm kind of doing this thing on the side
Right.
rather than, I'm building this thing. And I would almost, when I spoke about it, kind of brush it off. Whereas from that moment, and I can't remember the exact moment itself, but it felt like, particularly interestingly, when I transitioned from the kind of pre-clinical into the clinical years, it felt like, okay, now this feels much more serious. This feels like something that I'm all in on.
Very cool. I have a very similar moment as well when I was thinking about coaching, and when for me, it was like, okay, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? How do I, like, what's something that I could imagine myself doing forever? And it like leans into who I am and all of that stuff. And I was like, I think coaching might be it. And then there was this like voice in the back of my head being like, oh, people become coaches after they've had like a long career in something, or like once they've achieved something big, or like when you've been a consultant and you're thinking about retiring, And then I remember I was probably like influenced from consuming good content, I suppose. But a moment when I was like, actually, 10 years down the line, I would have been like a consultant for whatever many years, but I would have been a year one coach. Whereas if I start now, in 10 years, I would have been coaching for 10 years and I would have established myself in that space. And if I really want to do it for myself, and I was like, just got to do it, just got to go all in, like whatever. Struggle's going to be a struggle, but we'll go in. So for you, in those initial cold emails that you sent out and the first few free clients that you had, were they all also in the healthcare field, or were they just anybody? Okay, fine.
Yeah, so I just had this. The people who are going to give me a chance are going to be doctors, because they, you imagine business owners receive hundreds of cold emails every week. It's very hard to stand out. I was like, what unfair advantage do I have that I can leverage? I just want a foot in the door, and the unfair advantage that I have, and you still see people leverage it today, right? If a medical student messages you or I on LinkedIn, we will reply. We won't ignore them.
Yeah.
So it was just that. This was before I was like, I'm committed to this space. This was more of a thinking, what can I leverage here that might get me a response? And it was just, I'm a medical student. Doctor might be interested in a reply at least. So let me do that, rather than if I emailed a lawyer and said I'm a medical student, that's probably not going to have the same resonance.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Okay. And what was the hardest thing in all of this for you?
That's a big question. When you say all of this, do you mean the beginning? Do you mean...
Well, so it sounds like you had this idea. You're like, I'm going all in. There is something in here. There are people who are willing to, part with their money and time and energy to let me help them building their socials. So clearly there's an idea that's tested. I'm going to commit to it. What was the hurdle that kept stopping you from actually being successful?
I would say the most difficult thing is not the time commitment or the discipline or anything like that. I always joke throughout medical school I didn't sleep that much, because I would essentially go to med school, and then in the evenings work, and in the mornings work, and so on. I didn't really mind that. I quite enjoy working, so that wasn't too big of a problem. I think the real difficult thing is, and you've probably found this as well, knowing when you should like double down on an idea or a direction, and knowing when is the right time to pivot. So for a long time, initially the company was called Key Socials. That's still what it's listed as a company, because we did social media management. That was the thing that we did most. I then made the decision that I don't think that's the right way to grow, because for social media management, yes, it's super effective. Yes, we still offer it for some clients, but actually if you're a business owner, the thing that gets you return on investment quickest is paid advertising, either through PPC or through social media or whatever these other methods other than organic socials are. So I remember just sat one day and having to let go a lot of our organic social media management clients who had been paying us on a monthly basis, because I just made a decision that I don't think, in order for us to achieve the growth that I want to, that's the direction that we need to go in. But you imagine, and you'll be the same, but when you've got clients, when you've got a business, you have all of these decisions that you have to make on a basically daily basis, and some of them carry more weight than others. So I think you say what's the most difficult part or the hardest part, it's kind of the decision making and knowing when to lean in towards something, knowing when to back step, move sideways, and then move forwards again.
Yeah, that I can resonate with that. And I think, a lot of that kind of resonates with the work in the emergency department, but also I guess as a founder, like how do you, because I guess we're all just placing bets at some point, aren't we? We're like, what's going to pan out? Well, what is it? And where do we put our eggs? Do you think you've figured it out?
No, I think it's a constant game of figuring it out. I was speaking to a friend about this who's really interested in emergency medicine, and we were kind of having the conversation about this risk management side of things. And he kind of said, well, if you had have continued in a career, would you have gone into emergency medicine? And that's never something that's interested me, because that level of risk feels very different. Whereas the level of risk of financial impact, or, I'm going to take a bet that I've made the right decision here from a business perspective, I've always been way more willing to sit with that risk. But they feel like two different versions of a similar risk management, obviously with hugely different outcomes.
Yeah. And I don't think one is easier than the other, really. I think the fact that one is a life or death situation almost makes it easier to be like, it's very obvious what we need to do. Whereas when you think about money, it's like, yeah, but is that worth it? And you're willing to compromise to a certain extent. In some ways.
Yeah. I think it's so difficult to compare the two, other than both just have these loaded decisions that you have to make. I think maybe one of the separations is there's obviously the life-death matter of emergency medicine, which is you essentially can't compare to anything else, right? Those sorts of snapshot decisions where people have to fall into place and do the right thing at the right time and make the right call. Whereas maybe the especially as a kind of a small business owner, the risk is slightly lower on your end, but you have this sort of vague, vast number of decisions that you could make and might make, and you're not really sure of what the outcome would be in any direction, but you just need to bet on it and then see it through, and then somehow also know when to backtrack and say, I was wrong, let me try something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where are we? You've committed. You've done a couple of free clients, and then you've even pivoted and said, actually, it's not just about organic social, it's about a bit more. And I guess, I suppose what you were sort of alluding to earlier about, it being less about the innovation and the how you do things, but who you are as a person and who you become. Like, could you speak to that a bit and say, like, who were you before as a medical student? Who have you become now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the thing that I talk about most from a business journey perspective in general. It's very much all of the different identity shifts that come when you do anything. But I think in particular, when you go from being kind of medical student to also having a business, to then taking the business seriously enough that you're not going to do clinical training at all, right? I think a few shifts come to mind in particular. There's the shift that we've already touched on, which is I think about myself very much as there's like Tiarnan, who's the marketer, who's thinking about how we can improve the services that we offer from a results perspective, right? That's like one hat that I have to wear at the moment, which is how can we decrease the cost per booking on our Google Ads campaign? And that's me literally just looking at Google Ads and trying to work out that. There's also the version of me then that says, well, I need to step back and not be the person doing that. So how can I coach a team member to now have the initiative to go and do that as well? So the identity shifts somewhere from business owner to marketer to team leader / something similar to that. And then also all in the background of that, there's the identity of medical student doctor who's now not doing that anymore. So it feels very much like you knowing when to lean into the right identity almost is super important. And it's something that I hear lots of others talk about. And I know you've posted about this as well, right? Like almost being able to change what hat you're wearing at the end of the day and shift into something else.
Yeah, it's such a challenge. And I think, I obviously work with most people who are still clinical. So, 2 days of the week, 3 days of the week, like myself, we're wearing a clinical hat. And then like the other times we're switching back to like this founder thing where there's an idea and we're building and we're making these decisions and we don't know what's right. And there's also something that happens, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but with me kind of making those decisions and becoming more of a leader of myself, I guess, in that founder space where, I made tough decisions and tough calls and they played out in a good way. And I got stronger in terms of this is who I am. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not so good at. This is what I need help with. I think for me, it very drastically reflects when I'm in the clinical space as well. Like, I have a confidence that many of my other colleagues don't, and that confidence falsely doesn't come from my clinical competence. Well, yeah, it's not from like the clinical number of years of experience or whatever I have. It's my comfort with who I am.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've kind of experienced that change in other aspects of your life as well.
That's really interesting. I've not thought about it so much from the founder, translating into other aspects so much actually. I always think about this from the thing that I like to do in my spare time is martial arts. So I'll train.
What do you do?
I do mixed martial arts at the moment. So I do MMA,
Okay.
but I did a lot of wrestling before and Muay Thai as well.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And the kind of what you just framed, my whole thing was, let's say I had an exam that I had to sit. My frame was always, well, yesterday evening, I was stood in front of someone who's had X number of fights, and my whole job was basically don't get punched in the face too much. So whatever the outcome of this exam is, it's easier than that. So I had this sort of that translated quite well in the other areas where I felt myself being much more composed when other people maybe something like public speaking comes somewhat naturally to me now, but I only think it has because I've kind of put myself in those other difficult situations whereby public speaking feels like, well, I mean, the worst thing that could happen here is much less than other things that could happen in other areas of life.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you're saying that about the kind of founder going to translating into clinical work. Do you think that's I suppose there's a decision-making element of that. You've kind of made the decisions and have positive feedback loops. Do you think part of it is also the risk management sort of things, like being able to hold the weight of decisions as well?
I think for me personally, I think a lot of it is with my growth as a coach and what it means to understand leadership. And then in my clinical space, like as a senior reg, I'm leading more than actually doing. So it's a lot about like, how do I have communication? How do I hold myself? How do I understand what's not being said in the conversations? That kind of becomes more and more important. So, it's like, how am I leading the resource team? How am I leading the trauma team? Am I picking up on the subtle cues that people are dropping? Even in my patient consults, there's times when like medically there's nothing that we got to do for you, but then the patient still has worries and anxieties. And I think a lot of the coaching skills really kick in. And I think as clinicians, we all kind of have them, but practicing them specifically as a coach and getting trained and all of that stuff has helped me feel a lot more confident. And so I think there is a bit of an overlap for me personally. And if I think about others, so yeah, and one client in particular stands out to me. He's a neurosurgeon. He'll probably be on this podcast in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I think there's this element of finding who you are. I think as doctors, we, like you said, we follow what's being given to us and we kind of tick the boxes and we go to the next step. And there's a lack of an alignment. Like you're not forced to have to find, who am I? What do I do? What is my value in the world? But when that alignment kind of comes together, there is something about like, I know this is me and this is what I can bring to you, which is, it's funny because, as doctors, we have all of these labels and certificates to tell us what we can do and what we're capable of doing, but it doesn't feel like it's ours in a weird way.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can explain that any better.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something on something you just said. So, you know how you mentioned your kind of ability to pick up on these things that a patient might be saying, or that, thinking about the training that you've had as a coach, the experience that you've had as a coach that helps you potentially be a better leader in the sense of working with the doctors that are maybe more junior to you or others. Do you have because I feel like this is something we vary in, right? Like sometimes I feel I've made all the correct leadership decisions this day. Like I've really helped my team. I've done the right things. And then other days you kind of think, oh, I probably could have handled that situation a bit better. And I know some people have kind of daily rituals or like habits or things that they do to try and make sure that they operate from the right level. Is that something that you do as well? Do you have things that you're kind of doing on a daily or a weekly basis that try to help you keep operating at the level that you want to be as a leader?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, it really comes down to like the mental state I'm in. I tend to have a tendency to kind of like really quickly think about like a lot of steps in the future and like if there's a problem, what the solution looks like and how do I get to the end result. And I guess that can happen across multiple ideas kind of happening at the same time. And for me, the challenge really is to shut that down. And personally, for me, it makes a big difference if I'm meditating regularly, if I'm getting enough exercise. And I don't know, that kind of feels like silly things, but I think really having that mental control to clear your mind and just actually listen to what's happening, because it's not about me solving the problem. Like if I was the one solving the problem, that works beautifully. Like it's me doing it and I can solve it fast and I can solve it quicker and get to the end destination. But when the job is not mine and the job is somebody else's to solve, I think there's so much to kind of let go of and be like, actually, how are they trying to solve it? What really is the challenge for them? Where are they stuck and why are they stuck there? Because for me, leadership is like, okay, you've got competence and then you've got capability. So are people around you competent to be able to do the job? And I guess, you've got SHOs and you've got registrars and you've got nurses and you've got other clinicians that you're working with that have different competencies. But then with those competencies, are they capable of achieving what they're trying to achieve? And that often comes down to like so many other things, like, you know what decision needs to be made, but what's stopping you from making that decision? Or, from your perspective, you might be able to see that they're actually getting distracted by something that they don't need to be distracted by. And sometimes that's not a coaching job. And I think sometimes that's just calling it out and being like, actually, I think from experience, you might be getting distracted here. I don't know if that kind of answers the question you were asking me.
Yeah,
I've gone on a tangent.
Yeah, it just reminded me of, there's the book Surrounded by Idiots. Have you read that?
Yeah.
That's something for me that's been very transformative over the past 12 months, I would say. I've always had this sort of, again, somebody where you kind of trying to solve the problem that's 10 steps down the line and not solve every problem behind it at the same time sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when I started building a team, I was very much of why are other people not approaching these things with the same urgency or the same, this just needs to be done, this sort of, why are people asking me questions that I'm just surprised that they've even thought about in regards to this situation.
Yeah.
And then I watched the video, I can't remember the guy's name, but he made a YouTube video about Surrounded by Idiots. It's not the author, it's someone else. And literally just thinking about how other people communicate and how they like to be communicated to.
Yeah.
That was a light bulb moment for me where I was like, so when I hire people, and when I'm working with people or when I'm working with clients or whatever it might be, instead of me just communicating in the way that I like to communicate, I should constantly thinking about how would this person like this conversation to go, instead of always trying to be uber efficient, everyone taking authority and accountability over the decision. Like what way do other people like these styles of conversations to go? And that, it's been massive for me.
Yeah. If you enjoyed that, I would highly recommend the Gallup Strength Assessment. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's like £35 or something. It's not wildly expensive, but the level of insight it gives you into what is your unique strength in absorbing information and influencing other people. And with that, like, what are your common blind spots? I did that probably, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago. And it's been a game changer. Like really understanding who you are and how you impact others and why stuff happens on a day-to-day basis. Like it's amazing. So check that out.
What came up for you particularly for that? Because I love this sort of, I did Colby indexes and I get team members do the Colby index and stuff. So I quite like but what came up for you out of that one specifically?
So I think the big one that kind of day-to-day comes out is that like my top strength is responsibility. So like the way I execute things is by taking responsibility for it. And the blind side of that is that I say yes too often. But also when I say yes too often, it kind of means that like I take responsibility for solving it and getting it done. But if I'm not able to, that really kind of burns me down. But also it's directly translated into like how I've structured my business, because I know that if I'm coaching somebody, I get really involved and I'd rather give them, like, I don't charge by the hour. I don't say, oh, your time's up, next client, whatever. I'm invested in your journey. Sorry, my cat's trying to get to the light. I'm like really invested in their journey. And so for me, that realization said, actually, I can't work with like 50 people at once. I can work with 10 people and I will give them unlimited amount of my time. So text me whenever you can. We'll schedule a call whenever you need one. obviously working around both our rotas and stuff like that. So I think that's kept things very sane. And that's one I keep coming back to. And yeah, the other one was strategic thinking. So realizing that the way I think and process things is very abstract and can be hard for others to keep up, but is also something that I can lean into. And it's about like, okay, how do I bridge that gap of translating that thinking to communicating? Yeah.
Well, super interesting. I think, and when you do these sorts of self-reflective examinations, it just gives you like so many aha moments where you kind of go,
yeah,
this makes so much sense across multiple areas of my life.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah, and I love talking about it, teaching it, and I could keep going on about it. But I did have a question for you. So marketing and messaging and ads, I feel like the terms get quite mixed up. What's your take on them?
How I typically describe it is what we do in general is marketing. So marketing is kind of any business activity that serves the purpose of generating new business, new custom, right? We particularly work within digital marketing, so anything online rather than in person. We would then count advertising, typically in the lingo that we would use as being paid advertising specifically. So if we're talking about advertising, we would reserve the use of that word for paid advertising often because we would use marketing as being the more broad term.
Right.
We typically find whenever we go to work with a new business and they come to us, they kind of will use the words interchangeably. So they don't necessarily see marketing as being different than advertising as being different than something else, which is fine. There isn't kind of, I don't think that the definitions of the words carry a whole lot of weight from a practical perspective.
Cool. And this would be interesting to do. Feel free to kind of say, no, you don't want to talk about this. But I'm like, just for the fun of it, like you've kind of gotten to know me a little bit and you've seen me on LinkedIn and stuff. If you were to optimize my marketing, what would you do? And I don't mean to try and get free advice from you. This is hopefully just a bit of a fun conversation for the podcast. So feel free to say no.
Good question. From what I can tell, and this is limited insight, obviously, just from what I see on LinkedIn mostly, you're doing a lot of the free value piece, right? You're giving people information without expecting anything in return in order to build trust and authority. You've then also now attached this podcast on, or not now, you've been doing it for a while, but the podcast acting as both a get more eyes on you and what you do as a service, but then also, again, credibility, authority. You're the person who has a podcast. If you didn't know what you were talking about, it would be very difficult for you to host a podcast and continue to talk about it, right? I don't know if you're doing anything wrong in particular. That's what I always say to people when they come to us. It's kind of, well, what growth constraint are you trying to solve? Is there a growth constraint that you're trying to solve? Because if you said, well, actually, no, I've got X number of clients at the moment and I'd really like to be at 15 times that, then probably the level of input that you're doing in order to reach cold traffic isn't enough. But if you don't want that and you're happy to get, however many people coming through LinkedIn DMs inbound with referrals, there's always the question of what are we trying to solve?
What are we trying to achieve? I love it. Okay. So what I'm actually thinking about, just to keep the conversation going, is that I want to launch a paid membership at like £99 a year for people who are trying to bring their ideas to life, right? But also you mentioned not enough eyes on cold traffic. Can you just kind of elaborate on cold versus warm and like why target cold traffic?
Yeah, so what I typically advise for people is you have a warm network, right? You have people who already know who you are through your work, through where you live, whatever it might be. Those are the people who you want to go to first when you have this new business idea. You want to test the idea with them. You want to get people who pay for it, not just say that it's a good idea. You want to get genuine customers, people who say that this is very good, leave you a review. Yeah, so the difference between cold and warm. So warm is people who already know who you are. They are the people who, from a conversion rate perspective, meaning if you made them an offer on a new service that you have, they're more likely to have a higher conversion rate. They know who you are already. They probably trust you and they like you. So people who know you, people who maybe have just been following you on LinkedIn for a long time, these are all your warm audiences. And warm is great, but warm has a ceiling because it's only those people who already know who you are. So what we typically then do is we meet people at the point at which they say, look, I've got a newsletter. I feel like I'm kind of using it to the most of its capability. I'm doing webinars. People, it's kind of the same people who show up. And now I'm ready to kind of 10x this thing. I just want to get in front of more people who don't know who I am. That's a really conscious cold marketing strategy comes into play, using something like paid social media ads, doesn't have to necessarily be paid. You'll notice that I'm always biased towards anything paid because in my mind, that's the thing that you get to see the most clear data quickly, turn quickly, basically. But it could be that you decide that you're going to consciously invest in something like search engine optimization or an organic social media strategy a bit more. But all of these things that if you assume that nobody knows who you are and just think, how can I get in front of as many new people who might be my target audience as possible? If you think in your case, if you're thinking about launching a new offer, you think about what your existing audience size is and think if you captured 1% of them, you'd be happy with that. Would they say yes? Are they the right people?
Yeah.
Or would you rather reach a larger audience and start thinking about that? It's not the only thing that determines whether you should start trying to reach more cold audiences. Things like price point and so on do as well. But it's a nice way to think about it. Test warm first. If people are happy with warm, test cold with the knowledge that your conversion rate will often be slightly lower than warm because you're now having to convince people who don't know who you are that you're the who you say you are, basically.
Yeah. And so do you get involved in like what that messaging is? Like how clearly is it being conveyed to the cold audience and all of those things as well?
Yeah, we did a lot of work in this sort of space. So the sort of, I've got a product that works. Now, can I bring it to a colder audience? A lot of that comes down to trust signals. So, if you've tested it with your warm audience well enough, you should have testimonials. You should have case studies of what your work looks like. You should have not only the amazing case studies of people who are really happy with what you've done, but also the average case studies.
Yeah.
Because people need to, typically what someone's thinking is, obviously you've got all these like 5-star reviews, but what does the average outcome look like? If you've got all of that packaged together and you've already done a lot of work on who your ideal customer is, then it's essentially a case of how do we reach those people? Because you've already got a tested product and a tested service. You just need more of the people who you've already identified as being ideal to come in at the top of your funnel. If someone comes to us and says, we haven't got any customers, but we'd like to basically test this idea. We will do it sometimes, but you need to be ready to lock in for the for the experimentation and this might not go well because you haven't tested it as a product idea yet or a service idea.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So I guess for me, by the time people listen to this episode, I probably would have launched this membership. But I'll see how it goes. I need probably about 10 people. So it's not big numbers. 10 people for me to break even on the cost of this new platform I'm going to use. And yeah, I feel like I've got the reach to kind of get that going for the moment, which is interesting. Yeah, I've been on Instagram, I've been using ManyChat a lot. I really enjoy that. I think it saved me a lot of time and I wish LinkedIn had something like that, and LinkedIn's become more and more frustrating. It's like if you're running a marketing agency, you're probably solving your own biggest problem the best. Like your own lead generation, which is fascinating. So super cool.
Yeah, that's I can't remember. There was I saw a phrase for this where essentially the service that your business offers, in order for it to gain a customer, has to be good at the service that it's offering. There was a name for it. I can't remember. But yeah, we get this a lot with the doctors who come to work with us. They'll say, I saw your ads. Like I saw you come up on my Instagram and it said, if you're a private GP and I'm a private GP, so can you just do the same for me, basically? Can you be in front of people who I want to get in front of? So there is that sort of proof of concept by way of I got in front of you and you're my ideal target audience sort of thing.
Oh, brilliant. That is so good. Like you're not just telling them that you can do it. The fact that they found you was you already doing the job well. So it's like, cool.
Yeah,
I think that's such a beautiful way to approach it, and like so many questions go out the window of like, is this believable? Will I get my money back and all of that stuff? Interesting. What's your take on like the psychology of the buyer, or like, if you think through those early like free clients and stuff? Because for me, it's always like there's a reason people buy, but the outcome they're looking for might be different. What's your take on that?
So yeah, this is so interesting. I can give an example of this, which is slightly past the buy stage, but it's very interesting. So we actually had this recently. We signed up 2 private GP clinics at the same time in similar sized cities, so similar sort of population size with the same services that they offered. So by and large, on paper, very similar companies. By week 3, ish of the ads being launched. One is extremely happy with the results and very happy with everything that's happened. The other one raises some concerns. They've got the same results, right? Exactly the same thing has happened.
Okay.
So there isn't anything different from a results perspective for them, but there was something in the sales or discovery process that they have likely flagged that I have missed as being a reason why they've bought. This is what I come back to at least. So if two people can have exact outcome matches and they can perceive the outcome as being slightly different, then that comes back to why they bought in the first place. What were they actually hoping to achieve with this? What was the, like you say, what's the kind of purchase reason, even though the outcome is potentially the same? We do a lot of work on this now, a lot. I kind of say this, and it's not in a, it's difficult to say this because it sounds kind of too grandiose maybe, but we certainly turn away more businesses than what we work with because people's expectations of what a marketing agency can bring to them are vastly different. So you have the one person who kind of starts paying some money for ads, and for them it's a lot of money, and they kind of expect that that's going to turn around their business overnight. You have the other large hospital chain who has a marketing team who understands that this particular area of marketing is super complex and it might take 12 months to get right, but they just want the right people behind them on that. Yeah. And they can both come to you from the same funnel, pretty much. They can come to you with the same sort of, they both want a similar outcome, as it were, but their expectations and their reason for buying are so different. And I imagine this is one of the things that makes letting go of the sales process as a business owner quite difficult, because I can quite quickly on a call work out if this person's going to be a good fit for our business and we are a good fit for them or not. But that's something that feels like it'd be quite difficult to train someone else to understand when you're the one that's kind of got all of the client experience and what's went well and what's not went well and so on.
Yeah, it's challenging, and you can only build so many filters, right? So that's fascinating. And such a good example as well, actually, to kind of highlight like the difference between reason of buying, like the outcome they're looking for. Yeah, it's marketing is just so fascinating, and like I can see why you enjoy it so much. Tell me about this book that you're writing.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm writing it, so it's basically evidence-based marketing for private healthcare. Reason behind it is every time I open my Instagram, because of the business that I'm in, obviously I see the other agencies in this space, the other people who have pivoted into healthcare. And one of the things, again, from a marketing perspective, I'm always thinking about what can we do to stand out, kind of what you alluded to, right? Like we need to be good at our own lead generation in order for us to survive as a business. I was thinking about what can we do to be different, and in a similar sort of vein to you setting up the podcast, right? It's something different. It's a way to get your name out there. My logic has essentially been, well, I quite like writing. I write all my LinkedIn posts. I like writing. I know doctors quite like consuming things like white papers, things like journals. That's the medium that they want me to meet them in. You know, potentially rather than a YouTube video, they might like a PDF file that they can swipe through. They might like a physical book that they can hold. And then it also just gives me a chance to say, look, these are all the clinics that we've worked with. Here's the lessons from them. Here's the data that backs up that evidence. So essentially, it's an authority piece, kind of what Daniel Priestley talks about quite often. You know, writing a book is quite an authority statement. I'm meeting my target audience where they would like to be met. I assume this is kind of a bet on my end, but just based on doctors quite liking things to be written. And then also just a way to stand out and a way to kind of do something a bit different rather than the typical VSL landing page with a crazy offer of guaranteed patients, taking the approach of, well, actually, here's what we've learned over the past 6 years, and here's what you should probably do based on that.
Yeah. Wow, I love it. That is, this is something that I've really struggled with as a coach. Like, I think coaching as a thing doesn't really appeal to clinicians, and I think outside of that space it's become pretty normal. Like leadership coaching, executive coaching, business coaching is something that people invest in very obviously. And I often joke, I'm like, if my thing was called become a member of the Royal College of Clinician Founders, I'd have like 100 people signing up. It's like, what do people already invest in? And part of the reason why my thing is called the actionship, because it's like, oh, it's like a fellowship where you take action. It's like people buy fellowships, so you gotta give them what they're already looking for, and that's fascinating.
Just to jump in on that, there's a big part of marketing in general, which is meeting your buyer where they are and not trying to force your buyer to, you know, communicate with you in a way that you would like to be communicated with. So the two examples I can give, one is, again, private clinic that wants to get new inquiries. If they only allow inquiries to come by phone call, they're going to alienate people who don't want to phone a private clinic. I wouldn't call a private clinic. I would much rather go through an inquiry form. I also wouldn't WhatsApp a private clinic, but I know loads of people prefer to WhatsApp than go through inquiry form. And I know loads of people who, from the clinics that we work with, if they removed the phone call option, they would essentially die, because all of their patients are people over 50 who will call and will pay you over the phone by reading out their card details, but won't click on a link or an email. If you're rigid in your structure and how you want things to be, you alienate people. You kind of have to think, if I can place myself in the buyer's shoes, what way would they like to communicate with me, instead of this is how I think it should be done and I'm kind of not allowing anyone else to do it. I would probably, for me, writing is fine. I enjoy writing and it kind of matches. But you see lots of other people do the kind of, get on a sales call or phone people directly or host a webinar. And there's all these different things that you can do, but you just have to think, what do I really think my buyer would like to do most, and then experiment. And you might be wrong, but as long as that's the thought that you're leading with.
Yeah. I think that's a good place for us to kind of conclude the podcast conversation. I think it shows how genuinely obsessed you are with marketing and understanding what it means to bring new custom, generate new leads to businesses, and what it means to actually market for clinicians kind of running businesses and clinics as well. And you come across as a very genuine person, and I think I've enjoyed this conversation a lot personally as well. So thank you for being on. If anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is where I live most. So yeah, if you just search for my name on LinkedIn, that's where you'll find me.
Fantastic. And I'll put a link in the description as well. Thanks very much, Tiarnan.
Thanks so much.